Go ahead.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of History in a Drink with Sean
and Frank.
How you guys doing tonight?
So tonight we're going to talk about, we're going to jump from the West Coast where we've been doing a ton of our podcasts, and we're going to be going up and over to the East Coast and take a little ride into space.
Oh, over in Cocoa Beach area.
Yes.
Cocoa Beach and the Space Coast.
So our drink tonight is one of the most famous drinks from my generation as a kid growing up.
Yeah.
So we have our glass of water.
Water, okay.
And then, unfortunately, they don't make Tang in the metal containers like they used to. But we've got Tang, and I'm going to put a bunch of these scoops in here.
The drink of astronauts right there.
Exactly.
Wonderful. That orange breakfast drink, Tang. They took up to the moon with them, if I remember right.
I've got a spoon.
Yeah.
That'll be good.
Yeah. So we're drinking Tang tonight. Excellent.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So, and we understand that we usually do some kind of alcoholic drink on here.
Look at that.
But the reality of it is, it's history in a drink. And we thought this was the drink of astronauts. And that's how it was sold for years and years and years. And the other day I was watching Coneheads.
Yep.
And it came up where she, what's her name? The woman in the movie says, Tang, the drink that astronauts took to the moon. And so here we go to the moon.
Excellent. Very, very good. Now we also, too, just to keep everybody in par, is we do also have an alcoholic drink tonight, which is actually called the Astronaut. Now the Astronaut is
a lot of stuff.
So it's an ounce of dark rum, ounce of light rum.
Well, no, it's a splash of those two.
A splash of light rum.
And then it's got vodka. It's got a splash of pineapple juice, and it's got a lime with it.
And
there may be some other stuff in there, too.
You rub around the edge there to keep it going, and all good to go.
Exactly.
That one's for Frank.
Great.
Ah! And I got one for Sean. Excellent. Yeah. So here's an Astronaut for us, too. Excellent. Not quite Tang, not the breakfast of Astronaut.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Tang.
Let's go back to Tang. All right.
So we want to talk about the space race, and Florida is instrumental in the space race. And Cape Canaveral over on the East Coast in Kennedy Space Center, they figured out that was one of the perfect places to launch rockets from, because with the rotation of the Earth, they sent the rockets up towards the east, and then it would put it over the ocean when they were testing it and stuff like that. And if they had to abandon the launch and eject, they would be over the ocean, and it was much safer. And
we had chips and things ready there to help, so do whatever you need. So.
Exactly. And then once it got so high, then they turned it over to Houston. But this is the place where most of the rockets were launched from. And
still is today. I mean, Cocoa Beach is still the center of all that in the Canaveral Space Center.
Yeah, you can go and watch, what is it, the Dragon?
Yep.
Rocket.
SpaceX with the...
Exactly. Yep. So you can go over there and watch their launches. They test other ballistic missiles there as well, and you can go see those. That was one of the things that I was always disappointed with, is we lived here in Florida for a long time, and we tried to go to multiple shuttle launches, and every time we went to the damn shuttle launch, they canceled it.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to see one, and it would have been amazing to see it. But it is what it is. So we look at the space race, and realistically, we can go all the way back to World War II to look at it, and you can look at a guy named Werner von Braun.
Okay.
And he's kind of the father of rocketry, but he was a Nazi. He was part of the SS, and he's kind of a douchebag. But with Operation Paperclip, and we can do a whole nother episode on that, we bring like 1,600 German scientists here to the United States.
A lot of them were realizing, hey, you know what? The Nazis were not what we signed up to be.
No, they realized they didn't want to go with the communists.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And the Soviets, and so they hopped on the American and British bandwagon.
Gotcha.
And purposely got themselves moved over there. I was reading about it today, and I got to find a book about him, because it just blew my mind that here we are bringing SS officers who use Jews and others as slave labor to build the V-2 rocket that then was used to attack cities in England and stuff like that. And there was
and they were okay with it. So.
Yeah, and there was more people died in the camps than they killed with the rockets.
Yeah.
So, which is really sad. But so that after the war, the race became between the Soviets and the Americans.
Yeah.
And we had captured von Braun and brought him here, and he was kind of the father of our whole space race here.
Van Braun was a German.
Exactly.
A German physicist, basically?
No, he was a rocket scientist.
Okay.
So, when you say that you have to be a rocket scientist on
he really was a rocket scientist. Okay. Yeah.
So, our first real event in the space race comes in, excuse me, in 1957. Actually, October 4th, 1957, which is just 2 days ago.
Yep.
And that is when the Soviets surprised the Americans and launched the first satellite into orbit named Sputnik.
Sputnik.
All right? And then, within a month later, on November 3rd, they launched a second one, Sputnik 2.
Okay.
And Sputnik 2 had a dog on it named Larka.
Named Cypress?
No, named Cypress.
Not
well,
Cypress.
And it's better because this dog didn't come back alive.
Oh, no. Although Cypress definitely need to come back alive. So
exactly.
Okay.
So, the Soviets...
So Larka did not make it back.
No, unfortunately. So we have those two put up into space. And I've talked to my grandparents about it, my parents, and they remember when that exactly happened. That's one of those things that everybody knows because they were looking up at the sky and you could tune your radio and you could hear the beep that it was making to let us know that it was up there. Nobody knew what it was saying realistically. It was just a radio signal saying that we're up there and it's working. But everybody was freaked out about it.
How crazy that Russia beat us to that, and that's got to be kind of, as Americans, that's got to be a little insane.
Yeah, and so that changed all of the United States.
Sure.
And after that, one of the big changes was actually in education. And they really then focused on the sciences, the hard sciences, like physics.
What now we talk about STEM.
Yeah.
And that science, that technology, that...
Exactly, and it's the same thing. And so we had this huge jump in promoting it in the school systems and stuff like that. They started offering physics and chemistry at higher levels and all of that stuff in the high schools so that we could figure out who the kids were that were the best and the brightest so they could bring them into the industry to build the rockets and stuff like that. All right? So our first satellite into space is known as Explorer 1, and that was in January of 1958. So it was only a couple months later, but we lost. The Soviets had got the first thing into space. But
it's absolutely a race, though. I mean, we're incomplete and good. Nice Tang there, sir. Very good.
It is good. Then we look at NASA being created in 1958, and that, I think, is where the real change came, because then there was a true focus on going into space and all the things that go along with going
So prior
into
to this,
space.
we had no NASA. We
didn't
had
have NASA.
National
They
Aeronautics
had-
Space. Yeah.
Yeah, they had another agency that it kind of took over, but it wasn't focused on going into space and looking at what it would be in the atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. Because NASA just doesn't do going into space; it does all the stuff with the atmosphere and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, but what we beat the Soviets on is we put the first communication satellite into space in December of 1958. And I think when you really think about it, that is one of the most important things that NASA does. Because think of all the things that we use that are space-based when it comes to communication, whether it be satellite TV, satellite phones, all the stuff that we use now.
And now, I mean, that's the basis of basically space is that. And they've even gone through satellites as defensive satellites and everything else between.
Yeah.
So,
but communication, I think, is that the essence of what space really is about for us.
Okay.
More so. And the name of that one was SCORE, was it?
SCORE, SCORE?
Yep.
Excellent.
All right. Now, the Soviets were the first ones to actually launch a rocket towards the moon.
Okay.
And it went there, but they figured out the calculations of it, and it was going too fast that it didn't stop and orbit the moon, and it kept going. So
Gotcha.
this one is the first one that kind of broke.
Was there people on that?
No.
Ah,
These were
that's
unmanned.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this one just kept
They'd
going.
still
past
be
the moon,
going. So
and
yeah,
they probably still
exactly
are going. So that was called Luna 1.
Okay.
All right. And then the Americans put up right after that a weather satellite. And you think about today, it's us living here in Florida and watching all the hurricanes.
Oh, that's the primary thing for us to have a knowledge of what's going on, including what we got Hurricane Delta out there right now.
Yeah,
It's doing crazy.
exactly.
So those satellites, I mean, are the main piece of it.
And that was launched on August 2nd, 1959.
Okay.
So in the span of 2 years, we're putting rockets to the moon. We're putting satellites into space of various kinds that are doing lots of information for us. So the weather satellite, what it began doing is taking pictures and sending those back so we could see the cloud formations and all of that.
And where they're moving and how they're things.
And, we think of it today, for us today, it's just the norm to look at the Weather Channel and see where the storms are and all that kind of stuff.
I can pull it up on my phone and look at what our weather,
Yeah.
what's coming in, where the cloud's coming in, where the rain's coming in too, and really take it for granted.
Exactly. Now, when Kennedy comes into office, he's going to say that this is really the space race, and he's going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, which is the 1960s.
And that was his drive. That was part of his campaign, wasn't it? Really?
No, that was after he came into office.
Okay.
It wasn't really part of his campaign, but it becomes the center point of really his time in office. After you look at the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Sure.
But that was just a total push for the Americans. And we talk about the Apollo project, which is the project to take us to the moon.
Sure.
And when we talk about it in today's words, it really means like that quintessential project that brings all Americans together. Because during the 1960s, all the Americans put that effort into beating the Soviets and getting somebody to the moon. And so
we were a nation together.
Exactly.
That's basically what it was.
Exactly. And so when you look at the change from 1957 to 1969, when Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin land on the moon, just the tremendous growth in technology was exponential. All right. So now we want to talk a little bit as well about the first people into space. So unfortunately, America does not beat the Soviets to the first person into space. Do you know what the guy's name was?
Was it Yuri Gagarin?
Close, Gagarin.
Gagarin, that's it.
Yuri Gagarin was the first one to go into space, and he was in
I'm letting
space.
the astronaut talk for me.
There you go.
There you go. All right.
And it was a total of 1 hour and 48 minutes.
That was it.
That was it.
That was it. 1 hour and 48 minutes.
He didn't orbit the Earth or anything. He just went into the space and came back.
Okay.
So,
which, to be honest, nowadays we actually have tourists who can pay money to go on a plane and to go up and do the exact same thing.
Probably.
How crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. How much money you got? Are we going to go do that?
We can. I'm sure. I'm down with it.
Anna doesn't need to go to college. We can use her.
Exactly. Come on.
So the first person from the United States to go into space was a man named Alan Shepard. And he did not orbit the Earth. He only went up. His total flight was 15 minutes. But he made it into space.
Just
and came
enough
back.
to break that atmospheric boundary and to come on down.
Exactly. But the first man to orbit the Earth was John Glenn. And he is another Ohio native.
Yep.
When I grew up in Ohio, we always talked about in Ohio history about the space race. And actually, my high school, we had an astronaut who was from or did some of the missions on the space shuttles, and he came and talked to us. I remember when we were in high school and stuff. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
So for us in Ohio, the space race is really important because John Glenn's the first man to orbit the Earth, right? And then we're sending rockets to the moon and stuff like that. But our first real test was sending men to the moon and bringing them back. So we sent, and that was Apollo. Which one Apollo is that? 8. Thank you.
Apollo 8. Yeah.
So now 1967 was a bad year though for.
That was the one where they had to actually on the launch pad where they had they were testing and they had the actual fire that happened.
Yeah, and 3 men died: Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee.
Which Gus Grissom was one of the first men to go up as well.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, they died in Apollo 1 and the capsule right there on the launch pad, and it's just sad. But we weren't the only ones who lost astronauts. Now, the Soviets call them cosmonauts, but that year they also lost a cosmonaut in a similar accident. So it wasn't without risk.
It's it's crazy because these men were so brave.
Yeah.
Not only going to somewhere brand new that we hadn't done before, but also too. I mean, we were racing. This was a timed thing where we were kind of putting caution to the wind and making sure it was happening. So.
And these men knew what they were giving up.
Now, when Gus Grisman, that was in Cocoa Beach over in Cape Canaveral. So, I mean, that was our Florida's high. So, unfortunately, happened right here.
Now, the rocket that takes them into space is the Saturn V, and this was one of the largest rockets ever built here on Earth.
Yeah.
And so when we look at that rocket is going to take not only the unit to the moon, but it's also going to take the orbiter and what's going to land on the moon, but then provide them with enough fuel to come back. And that was one of the interesting things that they had to calculate for, was being able to bring them back. So this rocket had, how to figure that out and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So our first landing on the moon is Apollo 8 and, actually, no, it's Apollo 11, sorry. And that is with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. So Neil Armstrong is the first man to land on the moon. Do you remember what he said?
This is one great step, this is
One great step.
One giant step for mankind.
Yeah.
Or one small step for man and one giant step for mankind.
That's it.
Yeah, there we go. All right, let's have another drink.
Cheers to you. Mine's all done.
And TV.
There you go. Look at that. That's why I didn't remember it.
Now, I don't want to leave out Michael Collins, because Michael
Collins? That's a
Collins.
drink, isn't it?
Well, maybe it is, but Michael Collins was the astronaut who didn't go down to the moon. He stayed in the orbiter, and while these other two got the fame. Now,
So he was the designated driver.
exactly, exactly.
He was the poor guy in
we
the
need
ship,
one of those.
designated driving, saying, "Hey, you know what? You
Exactly.
guys have fun and party around. I'm gonna hang out.
To you, Michael Collins.
To you, designated driver. Excellent job, Michael Collins."
Now, it was probably one of the most watched events in world history.
Absolutely.
I found a statistic that said 723 million people watched
Wow.
that first transmission from the moon. And it wasn't just here in the United States, it was all around the world that was broadcasting this. So that, in and of itself, that was the winning of the race.
And I hate to say it, but even the technology of being able to transmit from the moon back to here of what was going on was just impressive for the day.
The crazy thing is, our phones have more computing power in them now than what was in...
like 20 or 30 times the computing power now of what it was to get onto the moon in the first place.
Yeah, and that's just crazy when you think about it. And think about the things that we do with it, which is stupid games and all the other dumb shit we do with our phones.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, when I look at it, there's so much more we can talk about the space race, because you then had other Apollo missions after that. Probably Apollo 13 is the most famous because they made that movie about it with Tom Hanks, where it was actually a mishap.
Where they didn't make it, exactly. They were supposed to make it, but they did.
Exactly. It was the first one that had an explosion in space.
Yeah.
All right. And then we can also talk about, for us here in Florida, the space shuttle is one of the most important things, because the goal was to launch it and then bring it back here to Florida.
Which I can remember like tomorrow, when the Challenger went up, and where I was when it went down and what happened with it. So I mean, it was.
I was sick at home in bed watching Price is Right when that happened.
Yeah, I was in school, and I remember it. Someone coming out of the library and saying, it happened, and just so hard.
Well, and same with the Columbia. I remember I was at my friend Kevin's. He was at St. Bonaventure University, and I had gone up there to visit him, and it was a Sunday morning, and that's when it happened. And it was crazy because one was launching and the other one was coming down, and Columbia was really the reason why we stopped the whole program.
Yeah.
So, that's a little bit about the space race here in Florida.
Yep.
So I hope you are enjoying your Tang or your astronaut.
And your
whichever
astronaut.
the case
Yeah.
may be. And we'll see you next week. We got one more episode left in the season.
Of Florida. And
Of
where
Florida.
are we heading?
That's a good question. I haven't decided yet.
So I think we ought to head up the Panhandle, maybe to the Floribama line.
Maybe.
Floribama's got a lot of crazy history. Alabama, Florida, there's all kinds of things. We'll
But
tease to you
Alabama.
guys. Yeah, we're talking about the Florida side of the Alabama
Oh, okay.
line.
All right.
We can talk about that. So,
All right.
so
Cheers.
here's to the space race and everything going on. So, cheers.
Have a good evening.